A new law enacted in California bans schools and school districts from informing parents that their child is transitioning at school from one gender to another unless the child gives parents explicit permission. This is the opposite of what's been going on with New Brunswick and Saskatchewan here in Canada. This is part of an ongoing debate that isn't going away. And no, it's not a right wing culture war. It's not a left wing culture war, but it is a culture war. It is something that we have to discuss. How do you involve parental rights? Who gets to decide? All of these things are major questions society needs to deal with. Adam Zivo joining me now to discuss this in greater detail. Adam, um, the idea that parents are going to be cut out, uh, I think, is one that is not going to sit well with an awful lot of people. I'd been talking about Gavin Newsom as a potential success for Joe Biden on the Democratic ticket. And as soon as he passed this law, I said, that'll never fly with even moderate Democrats and swing voters. A lot of parents, regardless of politics, would say, no, I want to know, and I should know. To me, that a law like this begins with the wrong assumption, and that is that all parents are a danger to their kids, are out to get their kids, aren't loving of their kids. What's your take on this law?
I'll be honest, I have mixed feelings about it, and I think the devil is in the details here. Let's look at what's happening in Canada as a useful comparison. So in New Brunswick and Saskatchewan, what they've essentially done is that they've passed a law where if if a school wants to formally recognize a kid's gender experimentation, then parents need to be aware of this and they need to provide consent up until the age of 16. I think after 16, they just need to be aware of it. That being said, these laws also do not force schools to disclose to parents if a kid is experimenting with their gender. And I think that's fair too, because parents should, of course, have a sense of what's happening with their kids. But we have to be aware of the fact that there are certain families where if they find out that their kid is experimenting with gender, that could put the kid in serious danger.
Yeah,
And
and I've interviewed both premiers Scott Moe and Blaine Higgs, Saskatchewan and New Brunswick, respectively, about this very issue, and they both have gone into detail about the supports that are there for kids who would be in danger, and the process that is in place for kids that would be in danger on this or on any other issue because of trouble at home. And so I'm comfortable that they're looking after kids who would be in danger.
I mean, yes, there are some supports, but are they enough? Will they prevent a kid from spiraling because they've been rejected from their family and be maybe forced into foster care and then end up getting addicted to drugs and on the street? Let's make a comparison here. Let's talk about gay kids and let's talk about Muslim kids, right? So imagine you had a law that forced schools to disclose to Muslim parents if their daughter was wearing a hijab or not, right? Because you might have some young women who have that expectation, but then from their parents, but when they get to school, they want to be more westernized. Uh,
Yeah.
would that be just? Would it be fair to say, well, if the parents don't like it, we can just call CPS. Similarly, I as a gay man, was once a gay kid who had gay friends. I knew, friends who did not feel comfortable or safe coming out to their parents and worried about being kicked out of their homes. And I know people who have been kicked out of their homes for this. And yeah, the state will try to intervene and help, but sometimes, some kids just want to hide it until they're at a point where they can stand on their own feet. And if you deny them this, you really destabilize their
But
life to the point where you ruin it.
but if you're hiding it at home that you want to change your gender, but you're not at school, and the school is, as an agent of the state, has decided that yes, you are no longer a boy, you are a girl, and your name is no longer John, it's Joanne. That's a big move for the state to make on somebody's child without informing the parents.
Well, this is where the nuance comes in. I do not think that schools should formally recognize any gender transitions or gender experimentation of this sort without any kind of, parental consent. So I don't think that the state or any school should be using new pronouns or new names unless the parents say yes. I think that the fairest way to balance a student's right to privacy and a parent's right to know what's happening with your kids is to have a don't help, don't tell system where the
Hold
school.
on, we're going back to the 90s with Bill Clinton and gays in the military.
Well, no, I mean, like, essentially, the school should not recognize any gender transition without parental knowledge or consent. Conversely, students should have their privacy respected, and school should not tell parents about any gender experimentation without the student's consent. So I think, it's okay if a student experiments with their name or something amongst their friends. Okay, whatever, the school just let them be. They still use the original name and original pronouns in class. The teacher uses the original name and original pronouns. But if the kids wants to, experiment with social norms or their names and pronouns amongst their friends, whatever. It's much lower risk than fully going through with the social transition with school support. What I did like about the law in New Brunswick, I believe, actually, I'm not sure if it's in both of them or New Brunswick or Saskatchewan, but essentially they had a situation where if a student doesn't feel comfortable telling their kids telling their parents that they want to potentially transition or identify as non-binary, what the school does is that it refers them to a social worker, and the social worker helps them come up with a plan on how to tell their parents when they feel ready to do so. So here, the state is respecting the student's right to privacy, but at the same time giving them the resources to help come out to their parents, to encourage a transparent relationship between parent and child.
And that is at least fairer than the idea, and Justin Trudeau has campaigned. I'm surprised he didn't this time during Pride Month in Toronto, because the previous year he'd shown up and he made it sound like any parent that wanted to know was some raving right wing lunatic and had to be fought like they were the devil incarnate. Again, that to me starts with the presumption that parents don't love their children, and I think most do. Um, and absolutely there are stories, as you were talking about, of your friends being kicked out of the house, or not everyone is accepted. But I think for the most part, it's better to start with the assumption that parents love their children until you have evidence otherwise. You recently wrote about something, a column that caused a bit of controversy, because you said, well, yeah, sure, parental rights, but it swings both ways. That, that also means that progressive parents get to raise their kids the way they want. Explain the thesis of your column and why you created controversy.
Okay, so on the whole, I support the parental rights movement. I think that the movement, though, can be hypocritical and can sometimes only support parental rights insofar as they align with conservative values. So the two examples where I think that parental rights like really succeeds is, first of all, gender transition. So I do think that parental rights should be respected in the sense that schools should not transition kids without parental knowledge. This goes back to our earlier conversation. And the second piece, I think, is about what kind of education is provided to kids. Since 2021, there's been this movement to ban the teaching of critical race theory or more radical forms of gender theory in schools. And I think that's understandable. I think that, of course, kids should be given basic anti-racist and LGBTQ inclusive, education, stuff that says don't bully someone if they're different, accept everyone's humanity. But when you get to a deeper dive into these issues, that becomes very political. For example, when it comes to racism, are you going to take a very progressive lens in the style of Kendi and what's her name, D'Angelo? Or are you going to go with the more conservative lens?
I like to go back to the Reverend Martin Luther King. I want my children to be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. I believe he lost that argument to Malcolm X, who wanted everything to be about race, and thus we have critical race theory, and everything is about race. And we get we end up with modules imported from the United States into Canada that don't align with our experience here, where racism is not so much about Black minority in slavery. That was more the American experience. Not saying it didn't happen here. It's just that was more the American experience.
Mm.
A lot of our racism revolves around indigenous communities. It revolves around Japanese internment camps, things like that. And we import these things that say, Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims, that's racist, or crazy things like 2 + 2 = 4 is racism. We import a very politicized view of it, as you were saying, and that drives parents crazy. I know, because every time I write about it, I hear from them.
Well, that's the thing. And look, here's the thing. I disagree with these progressive frameworks on racism, but at the same time, I think that people have a right to believe in them. There's nothing wrong if you want to believe in that. I do believe in political pluralism and diversity, but I think that when schools only teach the most progressive positions on racism and gender, then they are engaging what is arguably political indoctrination. And I think that more conservative or centrist families are very justified in pushing back and saying, no, don't teach this to my kid, focus on the basics. So that's understandable. And I agree with that. I think the conservative families have done really well in pushing back there. Now, where parental rights gets a bit iffy is when they try to ban, for example, certain books. So there's a big movement right now to ban certain books in school libraries. Oftentimes, these books cover gender theory or they include gay or trans people. And look, if you don't want your kid to see that kind of content, then you should block your kids' access to that content. And there should be mechanisms in place that allow you to control what your kid sees. However, when you advocate for a blanket ban on these kinds of books, what you're doing is you're denying other kids who are not your own the option to consume that material. And so you are denying progressive families the freedom to expose their kids to that material. And they have that right to expose their kids to that material because that is their parental right.
I'm holding a book, interviewed the author. This is Grave Error: How the Media Misled Us About the Truth About Residential Schools. Interviewed Tom Flanagan, one of the authors, just recently. This book is being banned by libraries across the country. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy on the issue of book banning on all sides. For school libraries, this has been my position for a long time, back to when I first covered the issue of porn showing up in library computers. And people said, oh, you can't ban it. You can't put on Net Nanny, even in the back when Net Nanny was a thing. That's how long ago it was. Some people advocated putting Net Nanny or other software that would restrict access to porn on the computers in the kids section of the public library. And they said, you can't do that. We're a public library. We have to accept everything. And I said, okay, where's your subscription to Hustler so that I can check out porn on my library card and take it home? Oh, well, we don't have that. It's not appropriate. Well, in my view, for school libraries, is it age appropriate? I think that's where I come down. And so a lot of the material is not. I know what got Scott Moe worked up about this were Planned Parenthood showing up with action cards on certain sex acts that I think the premier had to Google to find out what it was.
I saw some of those cards, and you know what? Maybe they're great for a fetish club in Berlin, but not for the Toronto School Board.
Exactly. A fetish club in Berlin, not a grade 4 class. So, that I think we've lost sight of that. And when it comes to issues around sexuality, you've got one side saying show nothing and the other side saying show them everything. Well, I don't know. Are certain things appropriate for kids who are in grade 4? No, they're not.
I agree with you. And I don't think that we should be showing kids porn or anything like that. I thought like those cards were really gross.
Yeah,
Um,
to say
but
the least.
I think that, you can accept the fact that pornography and certain things that are very clearly inappropriate can be banned, but that we should uh, not be eager to ban material beyond that. And let's make a comparison to hate speech, right? We can agree that there are certain things that should be banned under hate speech laws, but that there is an interest in very narrowly defining hate speech to give people more freedom to think, right? We shouldn't be eager to ban books or to ban thoughts. And I think the same principle applies to our libraries as well. Obviously don't put porn in kids' libraries, but at the same time, don't use that to justify bans of books that, maybe go into radical forms of gender theory that you and I may not like, but at the same time, I think have a right to exist in a society that is democratic, that is, politically and culturally pluralist.
All right, we'll put it to the audience. Let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this wonderful discussion on social media, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.